are made there every day. Write it down, commondreams.org. It really is important. And Ray McGovern, who's a former head of station in many parts of the Middle East, is constantly there. He is the CIA officer who was arrested for turning his back and disrupting our Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton, wearing a sign, you know, shame on you or something. He's an activist. And there's an organization called VIPs, Veteran Intelligence Personnel for Sanity, and they tend to do their columns on, you see them first on Common Dreams. And it's really important that we see this because it's the context for WikiLeaks and other leaks and what is going on. Somebody in the panel, I had only a few minutes to be at this morning, asked if it's appropriate to compare Julian Assange to Daniel Ellsberg or Philip Agee, and you know, what's not appropriate. We have had folks in our intelligence community telling the truth and either breaking the law or just exercising their rights as citizens with conscience for very many decades. There was a time when the United States stood for human rights and opposed torture. It was other people who did torture. We didn't do that. One of the 6 people indicted under the Espionage Act of 1917 is a State Department official who was really dismayed by waterboarding. His crime was not that he leaked anything, but he did discuss with the Baltimore Sun reporter a fact that we do, waterboarding. So this question, you know, what about the Nuremberg principles? What about freedom of information? All of us have to ask that question. Who are we now? And what do we stand for? And what do we need to have courage to stand up and stand for freedom of information and an American morality and ethics that we used to think we did stand for, like the Nuremberg principles and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for all. So I'll stop on that note and take your questions.
All right, so this works better than I expected. Thank you, Dr. Cook, for speaking. The next sessions begin at 1:45, which means we could have as much as 18 minutes of discussion after this. I've got my Phil Donahue microphone here, so if there are any questions, comments, anything, I will do my best to get the microphone where it needs to go.
First of all, thank you so much for what you do, and I can't wait to read your volume 3 of Eleanor Roosevelt. I just wrote a piece about her debate with Lillian Rock about whether there should be a woman president, and I was shocked that she was opposed to the idea of a woman president. What I wanted to ask you about is the timidity of journalists during the Bush years. And I mean, we can have a whole set of issues about Obama, but I see history repeating itself over and over, where you had in England the Downing Street memos, which got widely reported. In the United States, not so much. Torture, anyone had to do in the Bush years was just send out Dick Cheney to yell at you, and everybody just kind of backed down. What will it take, in your opinion, to get the kind of courageous mainstream journalism? Because we can talk all we want about common dreams in these times, et cetera, but what's it going to take for the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Boston Globe to be willing to take on the advocacy role of standing up to those in power and saying, you're not telling the whole story, you can call me a traitor, but you're not telling the whole story? What's missing? How do we get it back?
That's a really great question. Thank you very much. I really think we need a public movement. FOIA was a movement of historians, journalists, and attorneys. And we sued. And we, as much as possible, had contacts with the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times. A terrible thing, as you perhaps know, has happened to our media. The LA Times has been bought. It is no longer, it's part of the Chicago Tribune group. And the Boston, it really is a bit scary. But basically we're looking at the corporatization of media and where are our columns, where do we get printed? It's not easy. If you look at where WikiLeaks got printed, in the New York Times, in Pais, in Le Monde, in Der Spiegel, and in some British newspapers, several, not just one. But only Bill Keller has been attacking Julian Assange in that mean way that he has been. And it's sort of interesting. It's like, what's going on here? So I think we need a movement. I think we need a movement of historians and journalists to be out there saying, tell us the truth. When you think about what we thought was happening until recently, we thought the CIA was going to be pulled back. We didn't know it was going to go over the world the way it has and into every city, or the NYPD going into every city the way it has. What does the global war on terror mean? And we're going to do this to you until the global war on terror is over. What does that even mean? So we're in a kind of scary place. And for those of us who are really upset that we have a president who's a constitutional law professor who says targeted killings are not assassination. Excuse me? Hello? I brought that to my students, most of whom are police officers, and I said, I really need your help. What does it mean? Targeted killings are not assassination. And they're police officers, and they say, well, it means drones do it, and we won't have hand-to-hand combat. That makes it okay, and it's being done over there, and so it's not being televised. Remember, Vietnam was televised. So this isn't televised, and really scary things are going on, and we need a movement. And I have to say, the good news is, occupy everything. We have a movement, and it's going to, it's revving up, and the students are pretty good, and you're all fabulous. So it's hopeful. I refuse, to be pessimistic. Eleanor Roosevelt said, courage can be as contagious as fear. Now, I didn't know, by the way, that she said she didn't think a woman should be president. She didn't think she should be president. When she was asked to run for office, she said, I'd rather be chloroform.
You know more about this than I do, but I just wrote a whole article about this, and she actually did say in print, and I have the articles if you want them.
Yeah, I do.
That it was her belief that women weren't ready to be president because they hadn't had enough experience in the political sphere.
Right. So that wasn't late in her life, that was earlier?
It was 1933, 34, 35.
Yeah.
She got into a debate with Lillian Roth.
Right. Yeah, later I think she changed her mind and thought women should go anywhere, do anything, but she didn't want to.
Right. It was a very transitional
Great,
era.
great. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
All right, another question. Where am I going?
Can you talk a little bit about the invasion of property rights and information versus freedom of information with the recent concentrations on copyright, brand marking, trademarking, data ownership, including the shutdowns of things like keeping Twitter feeds?
I have a problem with that because what happens, there was a group of journalists, and I was among them, who signed a petition saying we didn't want the New York Times to send our editorials out into cyberspace without any acknowledgement or recognition